massive tax increase on Americans that is going to be used to grow government here in Washington, D.C., and that is not what the American people want, and that is not what we in the United States Senate should be for. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The Senator from Montana.
Mr. President, I ask consent that the following staff of the Finance Committee be allowed the Senate floor during consideration of S. 3412, Kirk Porter, Andres Roy Haley, Talita James, Allison Albers, and Eric Hageman.
Without objection.
Mr. President, Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying, quote, "I'm a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts." End quote. Mr. President, there have been a number of inaccurate claims over the past several weeks accusing Democrats of proposing tax hikes. Nothing could be further from the truth. So let me set the record straight. As Lincoln said, bring them the facts. Democrats are proposing to extend a tax cut for 100% of taxpayers. Under the Democratic proposal, all taxpayers get a tax cut. Those lower income, those middle income, and those upper income all get a tax cut. Everyone does. Millionaires get tax cut under the Democratic proposal. Billionaires get a tax cut under the Democratic proposal. All taxpayers who pay ordinary income tax are going to get a tax cut. Why is that? It's very simple. Because even if your income is above $200,000 for an individual or $250,000 for a family, you're still getting a tax cut for your first $200,000 of income or first $250,000 of income. So you're getting a tax cut. Everybody gets a tax cut. So I'll make that clear. All Americans get a tax cut under the Democratic proposal. The other side of the aisle is just saying, well, even though the most wealthy are also getting a tax cut under the Democratic proposal, they, on the other side, want to give an even greater tax cut to those earning above $200,000 as individuals or $250,000 as a couple. So I'm going to repeat. Everyone gets a tax cut under the Reid bill. The other side of the aisle says, okay, maybe that's so, but they want to give an even greater tax cut to those earning over $250,000. That's the fact. An awful lot of people think the Democratic bill does not cut taxes for those above 200, 250. It does. It does. The facts are clear. The numbers don't lie. It does. Everyone gets a tax cut. So there should be no question about that. As I said, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are threatening to oppose middle-income tax cut, which actually is a tax cut for everybody. They say, oh, no, don't do that. They say, go ahead and do that, but then just add a greater tax cut for those top 2%, the wealthiest of Americans. Let's go back and ask ourselves, why are we here, in part? These tax reductions were instituted in 2001, at a time when our country had record surpluses. I think the total tax cut in 2001 is projected to be about, I may be off a little bit here, $1.5 or $6 trillion over 10 years, at a time when our nation had a projected surplus, about $3 to maybe up to close to $5 trillion. I've forgotten the exact number. It was way above the cost of the 2001 tax cut. That's why, in large part, in 2001, Congress decided, well, you have these big projected surpluses, so let's give some of it back to the people. I voted for it, and that's why I voted for it. It made sense to me, with great projected surpluses, to take a portion of that, a little less than half of that, and give it back to people in terms of tax cuts. But times have changed. In the wake of 2 wars, what do you think the war in Iraq's cost us altogether? And add Afghanistan into it. It's over $1 trillion, unpaid for. So here we are, since 2001, we've got Iraq, we've got Afghanistan. So in the wake of 2 wars, and also the 2008 financial collapse, that very much hurt our economy. That's changed since 2001. As a consequence, our nation now is faced with record deficits and record debt, and we cannot continue to spend money that we don't have. We've got to put our nations back on a solid fiscal ground. So lots happened since 2001. In addition, something else has happened, regrettably. Today, the average household income index for inflation is actually lower than it was when the tax cuts for the wealthy were put into effect. It's lower now than it was then. And that means more people are making less money now than they were when these cuts were signed into law. Today, American families have less money to spend on their mortgages and gasoline and groceries, for example. They just have less after tax. And actually even include benefits. Americans are not as well off as they were about 10, 15 years ago. These cuts were enacted in 2001 for all Americans, and the lowest top two rates for the wealthy is 2%, cost future generations nearly $1 trillion. So I think it's just bad economics to continue these highest income tax cuts without evidence they actually solve Americans' economic woes. They really don't. And it's especially bad economics when our nation's debt has increased by $10 trillion since they were first enacted. Hard choices need to be made as we work to get our debt back to sustainable levels. We're all going to be asked to contribute, all of us. We need to make sure that the most fortunate pay their fair share to deficit reduction as well. Without a greater contribution from the top 2%, again, they're already getting a tax break under the Democratic proposal. Everyone gets a tax cut under the Democratic proposal, but it's wrong to go further and say that those above 250 should be getting an even greater tax cut. So I say without a greater contribution from them, that is, they get the same cut all the rest of us get, then we could more easily work to get our nation's debt down to manageable levels. Now, some have argued that we cannot let the tax rates expire for the wealthiest Americans, that is the top 2%, because they are, quote, small business owners. Well, let me talk about that. Let me address that and marshal the facts, as Abraham Lincoln would ask us to do. Being wealthy is not the same thing as being a small business owner. You can be very wealthy in America, very wealthy, but not be a small business owner. Now, some would have you believe that there are 1 million small business owners earning over $200,000 a year. Well, how do they get to that number? They get that from an estimate prepared by the Joint Committee on Tax. That's the bipartisan group that gives us accurate data, both Republicans and Democrats and senators and House members. Joint Committee predicts that in 2013 there will be about 940,000 taxpayers with some business income in the upper two rates. About 940 taxpayers with some business income in the upper two tax rates. But that's not all the Joint Committee said. They also estimate, but that Joint Committee estimate isn't the number of small businesses. That's a different number. Instead, it is the number of all individuals in the top two rates who receive any amount of income from a pass-through business or from rental real estate, royalties, estates, or trusts. That number of 940,000 taxpayers does not tell us whether the taxpayer spent any amount of time actually working in the business, or was that person, that taxpayer, merely an investor sitting on the sidelines. In addition, that number does not tell us whether the income is from a large business or from a small business. It can be a large business pass-through. So that number of 940,000 doesn't tell us, is it large or is it small? It does not tell us if the business actually even employs anybody. We don't know that. There are a lot of taxpayers in that bracket that don't employ anybody. They're not small business people. So that 1 million number being thrown around includes taxpayers who invest, for example, in publicly traded partnerships, which can be purchased on the New York Stock Exchange like any other stock. They're not small businesses, not as ordinary Americans would think them to be. The 1 million number also includes celebrities, sports stars who receive income from speaking engagements. They're not small business people, but yet they're lumped in that same number. No, but Americans wouldn't regard a sports celebrity as a small business person. And that's not right. And the 1 million number also includes best-selling authors receiving royalties for book sales. That 1 million number includes partners in law firms. Hedge funds receive their income as a share of a partnership distribution. They're not small business. That 1 million number also includes wealthy individuals who rent out their vacation homes for just a few weeks a year. Both President Obama and Governor Romney would be considered small business owners in 2011 under this definition. I wouldn't think they're small business people. Americans don't think they're small business people, but they'd be included in the definition, as the other side bandies about. So in reality, only a very small fraction of the top earners actually own or control or manage a business that is small and is hired anyone. It's a very, very small number. I've forgotten the exact number. It's maybe my staff has it, but it's a small number. And it isn't sound fiscal policy to extend tax cuts for the wealthiest 2% of Americans just because a small portion of them have income from a business and a tiny portion of them manage a small business. But that's what some would have you believe. I don't have the number with me, Mr. President, but it is very small. The number of persons in that 940,000 person category, they're actually a small business. There aren't very many, really, at all. Finally, the argument that higher taxes on the wealthiest hinder job creation is tenuous at best. Why do I say that? I say that because even the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office found that extending the high-income tax cuts, as those in the top two rates, was the least effective way of creating jobs among the list of alternatives commented on by the Congressional Budget Office. As I recall, the top of the list were items like payroll tax. If you cut the payroll tax, boy, that's a big job creator. If you extend unemployment insurance benefits, boy, that's a big job creator. Down to the bottom of the list is a job creator on a dollar-for-dollar basis is extending the top 2% top rates. That does not create jobs. Very few jobs, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And actually, it hurts job creation, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Why? It found that extending the high-income tax cuts actually reduce gross domestic product and the number of jobs over 10 years. Why? Because doing so increases the deficit. The CBO said that actually extending the top two rates is a job reducer, not a job creator, a job reducer because it would add to the deficit, and doing so would, all things being equal, would lose jobs. So despite efforts to hide behind small businesses, the fundamental question is, what's fair? What's best for our country? Should we drive up deficits further, reducing growth as a result by extending the tax cuts in the top 2%? Don't forget, we're already reducing our taxes under the Reid bill. Should we tame our deficits by ending Medicare as we know it and cutting important social programs to the bone? The more those top two rates are extended, the more we have to cut someplace else. It's just mathematics. It's arithmetic. And that's a choice we have to make in our country. There's no free lunch. We know that. We can't have our cake and eat it. Life is choices. Our fiscal situation means choices. You have to decide what makes the most sense here. Or should we control our deficits through a balanced approach that thoughtfully cuts spending and ask the wealthiest 2% to contribute no more than they did 11 years ago? Clearly, as we reduce our debt, we've got to cut spending. There is no question about that. There is no question about that. But there's also no question that there has to be some income, combined income increase, income tax increase, along with the spending cuts if we're going to be able to reduce our budget deficit. So the answer is clear. We should vote, I believe anyway, for Leader Reid's bill and continue down the path towards responsible deficit reduction. And I want to make the point again, just if it wasn't clear, the Reid bill reduces tax rates for all Americans. Middle income, upper income, all Americans, because we have a marginal rate system. The most wealthy, they got to pay that 10% bracket. Then they pay the 25% bracket, 15% bracket. Then they pay the 25% bracket. Then they pay the 28% bracket. Then they pay all the way up to the top bracket today, which is 35%. They pay all brackets. And so what we're saying, we're going to reduce your taxes. We're going to make sure you stay those low rates for the next year. So you're therefore going to pay less in income taxes than you otherwise would have to. Even if you're a billionaire, you still pay less than you otherwise would. So let's just go with the Reid bill. It's fair, right course, and I hope the Senate adopts it, and we get enough votes to get, so we don't vote, so we have 60 votes to get this thing passed. Thank you. You have the floor.
The senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, I rise for a moment to express my sympathy and condolences to the people of Ghana and to the family of her president, John Adam Mills. President Mills died in a military hospital today in Accra, Ghana, of throat cancer. 4 hours after his death, the vice president was sworn in as the new president of Ghana, a testimony to the democratization of that country and its leadership on the continent of Africa. Ghana has been one of the shining beacons of light in Africa for the transition to business, trade, prosperity, and economic development. And John Adam Mills deserves the credit for taking Ghana to the heights it's gone to today. Senator Coons from Delaware and I traveled to Ghana last year to meet with President Mills. We saw firsthand how he's developed a large-scale oil-producing country in Ghana, making that wealth come back to be reinvested in the people of that country. We visited the Millennium Challenge Compact that Ghana made with the United States of America to help her pineapple plantation producers be able to extend the life of their pineapples and export them into Europe for increased trade and agriculture in Ghana. We visited hospitals where money from the oil and petroleum that the country had discovered is now being reinvested in that country and in her people. And today, with this tragic death, we also saw the light of democracy as the government made its transition, the vice president ascended to the presidency, and elections will be held later in the year for the next president of Ghana. But it's important to pause as a tribute to President Bush and Condoleezza Rice, to President Obama and Hillary Clinton, our Secretary of State, who have worked tirelessly during the past decade and a half to work with the countries of Africa to develop. Americans have invested in PEPFAR, and we've reduced the growth of AIDS. We've invested in malaria prevention, and we've reduced the growth of malaria. In Nigeria is the last place on earth where polio exists, and it's about to be eradicated because of the investment of the American people. I've said oftentimes as the ranking member of the Africa Subcommittee that Africa is the continent of the 21st century for our country, and I think it is. And I think the investment our taxpayers have made and the investment our last president and our current president and both secretaries of state have made are paying great dividends. But it's important for us to pay tribute to those bold, brave African leaders who ran for office and to promote democracy, who served and reinvested the profits they made in their country's wealth in their people, and shine as beacons of light for hope on what has been known in the past as the Dark Continent. So in this sad moment for the people of Africa, and particularly the people of Ghana, it's time for us to also rejoice in what democracy has made in that country and what John Adam Mills did to produce that democracy and make it work. And I yield back.
Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to pay tribute to the life and legacy of Dr. Sally Ride, the first American woman to enter space and who passed away, sadly, this week. A truly extraordinary woman and an American icon and hero, Sally was a trailblazer who, with a steadfast fortitude and an insatiable spirit of exploration, accomplished what no other female in American history had before. When she rocketed into the heavens aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger on June 18, 1983, she also soared into the hearts of millions of Americans, including myself. Indeed, we recognized in her landmark achievement the realization of the quintessential American dream, that anyone, regardless of their gender, can succeed to even the greatest of heights, even if it is the stars. I was fortunate enough to have been present at Cape Canaveral, by the way, along with a colleague who was then Congresswoman Barbara Mikulski, on that historic June morning when Sally took to the skies. And I can vividly recall the palpable optimism and unabated excitement that saturated the air. At that point, I'd been a member of the U.S. House of Representatives for 4 years and was only one of 23 women in Congress. So you can imagine the tremendous amount of pride that we all felt in witnessing such a watershed moment. Indeed, it was a triumphant pinnacle in the fight to topple gender barriers and a progressive stride in the movement to shatter oppressive social norms. It was a bold response to those who could only see so far as to ask her before the flight, "Will you wear makeup in space? Do you cry on the job?" It was a bright beacon of hope to millions of young girls across the country, and indeed the world, who would come to recognize Sally Ride as the embodiment of their most fervent hopes and dreams. I was very proud to be able to participate in a tribute at the Air and Space Museum as co-chair of the Congresswomen's Caucus on Women's Issues, and a month later to pay tribute to Dr. Sally Ride and the Challenger crew, that their achievement, as I said, is America's achievement. In fact, in a testament to the depth of her remarkable character, Sally Ride lamented the unprecedented nature of her trip when she said, "It's too bad this is such a big deal. It's too bad our society isn't further along. It's time people in this country realize that women can do any job they want to." She recognized rightly that while her excursion was extraordinary, it shouldn't have been. Today, we nonetheless recognize that through her words, she gave voice to countless women, and through her actions, she gave them vision and courage to seize their dreams. That is the message that Sally Ride engendered as an astronaut, as a professor, and as the founder of the Sally Ride Science, her namesake company, which strives tirelessly to inspire and inform students by providing them with innovative science programs and resources. I had the opportunity to see Sally Ride last year, and she was recounting with enthusiasm the work that she was doing in working with so many young people across this country and sharing, you know, her commitment and her passion for education and for space. Indeed, she was a pioneer and a true American icon whose inspirational journey into space will long serve as an example that we can accomplish anything we put our minds to. But perhaps even more importantly, she bequeaths to future generations a legacy that transcends her time, unbounded by earthly ties. She leaves to us the omnipotent notion that we can and will do what is hard, and that we will achieve what is great, regardless of who we are. And it will indisputably resonate for generations to come. Leonardo da Vinci once observed, and I quote, "When once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will always long to return," end quote. Well, Mr. President, today we fondly remember a woman who had her eyes turned skyward not only for herself, but for the women of future generations who would follow in her example and in her footsteps. We take comfort in knowing that the stars are now indeed where she rests, and we continue to firmly keep her family and friends in our thoughts and prayers. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I rise today to join my colleagues who have been to the floor earlier this afternoon to emphasize the importance of getting the House to act to pass the Violence Against Women Act. We've passed a bipartisan reauthorization in the Senate, and now it's time for the House to do the same. There are provisions in the Senate version of the bill that offer critical protections for survivors, for Native Americans, for immigrants, for the LGBT community, and for students, for young women who are on college campuses. And it's that importance of protecting those victims on college campuses that I want to specifically address this afternoon. According to the Department of Justice, 25% of college women, that's 1 in 4, 25% of college women will be victims of rape or attempted rape before they graduate within their 4-year college period. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network reports that college-age women are 4 times more likely than any other age group to face sexual assault. In addition, experts believe that rape and sexual assault are among the most underreported crimes, So that 1 in 4 could be even greater. In the Senate-passed legislation, so the Leahy-Crapo bill, there are provisions to address the challenges that young women face on college campuses. The legislation that we passed here in the Senate requires schools that receive VAWA funds to do the following. First of all, to state the policies and procedures that are in place to protect victims and to provide prevention education for all incoming students. Many young girls arrive on a college campus to live on their own for the very first time. They're struggling to orient themselves in a new environment, and this makes them vulnerable. They need to be given clear guidance about what to do in case they become victims. The legislation also requires institutions to implement a coordinated response, both internal and external to the campus. So this means that survivors are helped if they want to hold their attackers accountable, whether through a process that the university has set up or by bringing criminal charges and working with the police. This provision tells young women, you are not alone. You're supported. Your school will help you. And the third provision that's very important in the Senate-passed bill is that it would provide training, require schools to provide training on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking for campus law enforcement and to members of the campus judicial boards. Now, last week in New Hampshire, my office spoke with Forrest Seymour, who's the Sexual Assault Prevention Coordinator at Keene State College, which is a small college with about 6,000 students in the western part of New Hampshire. Forrest said that all of these provisions that are in the Senate-passed bill are very important and really necessary because universities need more guidance about how to best serve students who are victims of rape, dating violence, and stalking. This is especially important at small universities like Keene, where they have limited resources. Training for campus law enforcement is critical because they're the first responders. And school administrators who serve on campus judicial boards also need special training because word spreads very fast on college campuses about whether survivors should feel comfortable going forward. So these processes need to be handled with appropriate sensitivity, and the training that's required by the Senate Violence Against Women Act will help make sure that these young women feel safe. The Senate-passed version of the bill will help young women like Harmony, who began her first year in college at Plymouth State University in New Hampshire in 2006. She was really excited to be there. She made new friends, and she quickly became comfortable in her new surroundings. Unfortunately, one night, someone she thought was a friend took advantage of that trust and sexually assaulted Harmony. Harmony was ashamed and confused. She felt violated. She began to question all of her new relationships. She was scared all of the time, and she was sure everyone could tell she was a victim. So Harmony didn't tell anyone. She didn't know where to turn. She was scared that she wouldn't be believed, and she even considered dropping out of school. But fortunately, Harmony did finally reach out, and she found support. She graduated from Plymouth, and now she works as a case manager for survivors of domestic violence in an emergency shelter, helping other survivors through the most difficult periods in their lives. Now Harmony shares her story all over the country, encouraging victims to come forward, promising them they will be believed, they will be supported. If Harmony has the bravery and the courage to make these promises to survivors, so should we. We owe it to the young, to the vulnerable women on college campuses across this country to pass the Violence Against Women Act now. It's time for the House to act. Session is running out. We need to see this legislation reauthorized. We need to see the Senate version reauthorized so that we can guarantee to young women like Harmony across this country that they will get the support they need. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield the floor and note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Today marked the 14th.
The senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, are we in a quorum call?
We are.
I would ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Mr. President, like you, I come to the floor this evening with a heavy heart. I know as senators and leaders we're expected to have words for every occasion. And what happened last Friday morning makes it very difficult to put words that are appropriate. However, as I think of the Coloradans that were there that we're so lucky to represent, Their actions spoke louder than words. Their actions spoke very loudly on a Friday morning in the city of Aurora, and I want to focus on the actions of all those brave, decent Coloradans who were victims in a variety of ways at the horrific movie theater shooting that took place there in Aurora. And it cut short the lives of 12 people. It injured approximately 58 others. And I'm rising to pay tribute to all of those people as well as to their families and their loved ones. But I think, and I know the presiding officer, my colleague and my fellow senator from Colorado, knows that most importantly, we're going to be here to state emphatically that Aurora will triumph over adversity and our state, Colorado, will emerge stronger than ever. I know from the time I woke up to the news of the movie theater shootings in Aurora early Friday morning, July 20th, I, along with the rest of Colorado and our country, have experienced emotions ranging from deep, profound sadness to utter, frankly, outrage. Our state was just starting to recover from the devastating wildfires that have destroyed hundreds of homes, forced tens of thousands to evacuate their communities, and scorched thousands of acres in our beautiful state of Colorado. Boy, with that in mind, none of us could have been prepared for the news of these mass shootings in one of our communities. I know the presiding officer has three beautiful daughters. I have two children. I know that having loved ones stolen from us in such a tragic and violent fashion is something you can never be prepared for. But it's during these times that we're also reminded to cherish those all too brief moments that we have with the people we love. And though this heinous crime may have shaken us, it did not break us, and it will not break us. We will mourn those we've lost and those who are injured, and with them in mind, we will heal and we will become stronger. Sadly, Mr. President, this kind of tragedy is not new to Colorado. It was 13 short years ago that we learned of another mass shooting at Columbine High School on the western side of Denver. And as a nation, we're reminded of more recent shootings at Virginia Tech, Fort Hood, Texas, and Tucson, Arizona. These incidents may occur in one city or in one state, but they're national tragedies that tear at us all and then cause us all to tear up and cry together. Like all Americans, my heart goes out to the victims and their families. And I also remain hopeful. The presiding officer and I were at the hospital, one of the hospitals on Sunday with the President, that the survivors are going to defy the odds on their road to recovery, and we've been truly inspired by their stories. I want to take a moment and applaud the leadership shown by Colorado's public servants, from Governor John Hickenlooper, Aurora Mayor Steve Hogan, and especially Chief of Police Dan Oates in the Aurora Police Department. There are also other metro area law enforcement professionals who came to the scene almost immediately, first responders, medical professionals on site and in the number of hospitals where the victims were taken. I think what's most notable is that they worked seamlessly to carry out the city's disaster plan and protect the victims from further harm. The Aurora police and firefighters arrived a mere 90 seconds after the first 9/11 call was placed. And there's no question that lives were saved by the swift and coordinated action of Aurora's first responders. And I have to say, this incident showed, as similar tragedies have before, that America shines brightest when the night is darkest. And that was literally the situation at midnight on Friday morning in Aurora. Mr. President, we had the uplifting experience of hearing the stories of bravery coming out of Aurora. We marveled at those stories on Sunday, and you can't but start with the fact that at least 4 young men demonstrated the heights of heroism when they sacrificed their lives to protect their girlfriends from the hail of this gunman's bullets. And one young woman had the courage to remain by the side of her wounded friend, calmly applying pressure to her friend's bleeding neck wound while dialing 911 with her other hand as the gunfire continued around her. Let me put it this way. Lives were saved Friday morning by those who did not let fear override their capacity to care for one another. Mr. President, these experiences have underlined for me and our entire nation that what makes us great and will help us endure this tragedy, and that is our people. I saw that Sunday night, we all saw that Sunday night while participating in a moving vigil in Aurora, where our community not only mourned together but also held together during this most difficult time. Although the West is known for its rugged individualists, Colorado is also known for its rugged cooperators, people who help their neighbors in times of adversity. We saw it after the recent wildfires, and we see it again now. President Obama's visit with victims and families on July 22nd, just Sunday, 2 days ago in Aurora, provided comfort and support to those in need, and again reminded us that the sanctity and strength of family and community is what unites us in the face of adversary. Coloradans have seen that in the wake of this tragedy, our nation has come together for Aurora and our state. And to my colleagues and anyone listening today, let me say humbly, we are grateful. Mr. President, I want to take a moment to say the names of the 12 people who were taken from us too soon, and I know that later you will share even more of their stories with us and with the nation. Their families and friends have my commitment that we will to honor these good people, these Coloradans. Never forget them as the healing process goes on. So, Mr. President, the 12 Coloradans, Americans who we lost Friday morning: Jonathan T. Blunk, Alexander J. Boyk, Jesse Childress, Gordon Cowden, Jessica Gawi, Michaela Medic, Matthew McQuinn, John Larimer, Alex M. Sullivan, Alexander Teves, Rebecca Wingo, and I think the hardest name for all of us to say, that of 6-year-old Veronica Mosier Sullivan. I smile in my sadness because I think the presiding officer has seen the photo of her with an ice cream cone in hand, delight on her face, ice cream on her nose. And I guess maybe what we could do is each take the time to enjoy an ice cream cone, maybe leave that ice cream on our nose for a little bit and remember her. In honor of these victims, I've filed a congressional resolution, Senate Congressional Resolution 53, along with my colleague, the presiding officer, Senator Bennett. Congressman Perlmutter has filed an identical resolution in the U.S. House of Representatives. And the resolution, among many things, strongly condemns the atrocities which occurred in Aurora, offers condolences to the families, friends, and loved ones of those who were killed in the attack, and expresses hope for the rapid and complete recovery of the wounded. Applauds the hard work and dedication exhibited by the hundreds of local, state, and federal officials and others who offered their support and assistance. And last, but certainly not least, honors the resilience of the community of the city of Aurora and the state of Colorado in the face of such adversity. I ask all of my colleagues in the Senate to support Aurora and support this resolution. Mr. President, as we pay tribute to our fallen fellow Americans and the heroes around them, here's what I hope can come out of what can only be described as a senseless tragedy. Can we harness the sense of community we feel this week and use it to create a lasting sense of collaboration in America, and use it to solve our shared challenges in a measured, respectful, and thoughtful way? We can truly learn from those who selflessly gave of themselves during the chaos of the Aurora shootings and draw from it the strength to be better people, better family members, and yes, even better legislators. In Roman mythology, Aurora is the goddess of dawn who renews herself each morning. At dawn on Friday, the chaos and the pain and the tragedy of the night before still lingered over that wonderful city of Aurora. But by dawn on the second day, signs of heroism, of recovery, and of community began to shine through the darkness of the great Colorado city called Aurora. As each dawn signals a new day, we owe it to the victims to rise to the occasion and renew our commitment to make this a better, stronger, and more perfect nation. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
As we heard from Senator Udall, members of the Colorado delegation in both the Senate and the House have introduced a congressional resolution condemning the shooting in Aurora, Colorado. A handful of Democrats are calling for a ban on high-capacity ammunition clips after the movie theater shooting. But the Associated Press writes that Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, along with House Speaker John Boehner, told reporters today that there should be no push for tighter gun control. Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner is on Capitol Hill tomorrow before the House Financial Services Committee and Thursday before the Senate Banking Committee. National Journal writes that the Treasury Secretary has emerged at the center of a congressional inquiry into whether the Federal Reserve Bank of New York appropriately handled its detection that banks were rigging LIBOR, a benchmark interest rate that when he was running the agency in 2007. We're covering Secretary Geithner tomorrow morning, live at 9:30 Eastern on C-SPAN 3.
Mr. President.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask the quorum call be officiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to first thank my friend, and I don't mean that in the political sense. I mean that in the real sense, the senior senator from Colorado, the presiding officer, for his incredibly thoughtful remarks about the tragedy last week in Colorado, and I can't think of any more fitting place to be than here with you tonight to have this conversation. So thank you very much for your words. In just a few dark moments last week in Aurora, Colorado, 12 innocent lives were taken from us. 12 people full of life and aspirations, loved by family and friends, and now 12 people remembered by an entire nation. As the presiding officer said, thousands of Coloradans attended a vigil hosted by the city of Aurora on Sunday evening. We shared tears and prayers. We also resolved to support one another, to heal, and to always remember those who lost their lives on July 20th, 2012. And it's for that purpose that the presiding officer and I come to the floor this evening. First, is Jonathan Blanc, age 26. John was a father of two who moved to Colorado in 2009 after 3 tours in the Persian Gulf and North Arabian Sea for the U.S. Navy. He was a certified firefighter and EMT. John lost his life protecting his friend Jansen Young from the gunman's line of fire. John shielded her from gunfire by pushing her to the ground while shots were fired. He was supposed to fly on Saturday to Nevada to see his wife Chantel Blanc and his 4-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son. Instead, his wife had to put up the dress her daughter had picked out to wear to the airport. She told her daughter that they wouldn't see their dad anymore, but that he would still love them and look over them. His daughter, Haley, is comforted by calling her father's cell phone and hearing him on voicemail. This is A.J. Boyk, Alexander Boyk, age 18. A.J. recently graduated from Gateway High School. He enjoyed baseball, music, and making pottery. A.J. was to start art classes at the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design in the fall. He was described, quote, as being the life of the party. A.J. could bring a smile to anybody's face. He was a young man with a warm and loving heart. This is Jesse Childress, age 29. Jesse was an Air Force cyber systems operator based at Buckley Air Force Base. He loved to play flag football, softball, and bowl. He was a devoted fan of the Denver Broncos, for which he secured season tickets. And he was described by his superior officer as an invaluable part of the 310th family who touched everyone he worked with. This is Gordon Cowden, age 51. Gordon was originally from Texas and lived in Aurora with his family. He was, quote, a quick-witted world traveler with a keen sense of humor. He will be remembered for his devotion to his children and for always trying to do the right thing, no matter the obstacle. Gordon took his 2 teenage children to the theater the night of the shooting, both of whom, thankfully, made it out unharmed. This is Jessica Gowie, age 24. Jessica was an aspiring journalist, most recently interning with Mile High Sports Radio in Denver and went by the nickname Redfield. She was hardworking and ambitious, with a generous spirit and kind heart. When numerous homes were recently destroyed by Colorado wildfires, Gowie decided to start collecting hockey equipment to donate to the kids affected because she wanted to help. This is John Thomas Larimer, age 27. John was a cryptologic technician with the Navy, based also at Buckley Air Force Base, a job which requires, quote, exceptionally good character and skills. Originally from Chicago, he was the youngest of 5 siblings and had joined the service just over a year ago. Like his father and grandfather, John chose to serve in the U.S. Navy. John's superior officer called him, quote, an outstanding shipmate, a valued member of the Navy, and an extremely dedicated sailor. Colleagues were drawn to his calming demeanor and exceptional work ethic. He was also known as an extremely competent professional. Here's Matthew McQuinn, age 27. Matt died while protecting his girlfriend, Samantha Yowler, by jumping in front of her during the shooting. Matt and Samantha moved to Colorado from Ohio last fall and worked at Target. He and Samantha were very much in love and planning their life together. Because of Matt's bravery, Samantha was only wounded in the knee and is expected to make a full recovery. This is Michaela Medic, age 23. Kayla was a graduate of William C. Hinckley High School in Aurora and a resident of Westminster. She worked at Subway and was a huge Green Bay Packers fan. Kayla would plan weekend activities around watching the games with her brother and father. She is remembered as a loving and gentle young woman. This is Veronica Mosier Sullivan, age 6. Veronica had just learned to swim and attended Holly Ridge Elementary School in Denver, Colorado. She was a good student who loved to play dress-up and read. Veronica's mother, Ashley Mosier, remains in critical condition at Aurora Medical Center. She was shot in the neck and abdomen. We pray for Ashley's recovery and strength in working through the passing of her daughter, Veronica. Alex Sullivan, age 27. Alex was at the movie celebrating his 27th birthday and first wedding anniversary. He loved comic books, the New York Mets, and movies. Alex was such a big movie fan that he took jobs at theaters just to see the movies. Alex stood 6 feet 4 inches and weighed about 280 pounds. He played football and wrestled before graduating high school in 2003 and later went to culinary school. Alex was known as a gentle giant and loved by many. This is Alexander Tevis, age 24. Alex received an MA in counseling psychology from the University of Denver in June and was planning on becoming a psychiatrist. He also competed in the Tough Mudder, an intense endurance challenge, and helped students with special needs. Alex was at the theater on the night of the shooting with his girlfriend, Amanda Lindgren. When the gunman opened fire, Alex immediately lunged to block Amanda from the gunfire, held her down, and covered her head. This is Rebecca Wingo, age 32. Rebecca, originally from Texas and a resident of Aurora, joined the Air Force after high school, where she became fluent in Mandarin Chinese and served as a translator. She was a single mother of 2 girls and worked as a customer relations representative at a mobile medical imaging company. Rebecca was also enrolled at the Community College of Aurora since fall 2009 and had been working toward an Associate of Arts degree. She was known to family and friends as a quote, gentle, sweet, and beautiful soul. President, here's a photo of the gathering that we had last Sunday night in Aurora. I believe, like you, Mr. President, that the early morning hours of July 20th, 2012 will not be remembered for the evil that happened. Scripture tells us, quote, not to be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That's what the people of Aurora and Colorado have been doing since the first moment of this tragedy, and that is what we will continue to do. In time, we will not remember the morning of July 20th for the evil that killed 12 innocent and precious people. Instead, we'll remember the bright lives of those we lost and the families they leave behind. We'll remember the 58 wounded survivors whose recovery bears witness to humanity's strength and resolve. And tonight, knowing that some are still in critical condition, we pray for their recovery. We'll remember the heroic acts of everyday citizens, our first responders, and medical personnel that saved lives that otherwise surely would have been lost. We'll remember the continuing generosity of those Coloradans and Americans who donated blood in record numbers in raising funds to support the families in this trying time. And in time, because we are all Aurora, we'll draw strength from the example set by one great American city and the faith of her people in one another. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. I'd suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.